The Liberal government has weakened our economy with anti-energy laws.
Mr. Carney, you are becoming a real Canadian leader, saying one thing in French and another one in English.
While these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, it's clear. The Liberals bought a pipeline, they built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about.
You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's mind with nonsense.
Mr. Poilievre, you spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone, and we're
doing a
in a new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different.
Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government?
25 seconds left in this segment for you to respond to that.
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much.
Will you look at the camera in the eye and apologize to the many people who suffered as a result of the inflationary policies that you advised Justin Trudeau to implement?
You know, I said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Okay, those are just some of the highlights from last night's leaders' debate, the final face-to-face confrontation of this campaign. So did it change the direction of the race, or did it come too late to make a significant difference? We're going to bring back our panel of party insiders, Jordan Likeness, Greg McEachern, and Fred Delory. Jordan, let's start with you. What's your initial high-level takeaway of that debate? It's the last big set piece of the campaign. Did it matter? Too early to know? What do you think?
I think it mattered in that it is likely going to confirm the direction that the campaign is already going. I think that every leader, maybe with the exception of the Bloc, got a little bit of something that they needed out of the debate last night. So I think that Carney had a relatively solid night. He was able to withstand the attacks. He brought, the sense of gravitas, leadership, however you want to put it, that people find appealing. He brought that to the stage, even if he did get a little lost in the policy at some points. And Pierre Poilievre had a conundrum, right? So he brought the version of himself to the stage that is his prime ministerial person. So that is less personal attacks, that is less fire, a little calmer. And I think that within those constraints, he did well. But the challenge is when you strip away sort of the fire and the populism that really has animated his rise, do voters find him appealing? And, I think he had a good moment. We'll talk about that later. But I'm not, he's a bit in a catch-22. And as for Singh, his brief was pretty straightforward. He needed to fight his way in. He needed to show the relevance of the NDP and why it matters to have a New Democrat presence on our federal political scene. And I think he was able to effectively do that. He brought some of the same energy that we saw from the French debate. He brought that to the English debate, and I think it served him well last night.
Fred, what are your thoughts? Your big takeaway after watching that last night?
Yeah, I think the two front runners, did very well in doing what they needed to do in many regards. I thought Poilievre looked statesman-like in many ways, where he was more reserved and not the attack dog leader of the opposition that he's been over the last number of years.
You saw glimpses of it a little bit earlier in the debate, but it subsided.
Look, he is who he is, but at the end of the day, I thought he looked pretty calm. And
he had a good night, I thought.
And he kept coming back to his ballot question a lot in many regards, and the way he went at Carney when the question was asked. When each leader got to ask a question, I thought he did a very good job of putting it right to Carney about inflation. I thought Carney looked incredibly smart as well. Like he was, going into the policy depth he went into. I think that's what Canadians kind of want to see right now in this election, like someone who has the depth and the ability to do this. But I think it was a strategic mistake for Carney to ask about, when he had the question that he could ask any leader, he asked about security clearance. What is your ballot question? It's Trump. It's the 51st state. He didn't go into any of this stuff, and I don't know what the question he could have put to Poilievre, but it could have been something. His campaign's been trying to draw comparisons. I don't know why he didn't.
I would have asked him why no Conservative MP went on U.S. cable to defend Canada against Trump, like everybody else did.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, very few opposition members did. I know
the Democrats, but a lot of people did. I think that could have been a more effective.
There's lots of questions he could have asked that could have tried to tie to his ballot question. Instead, he went off on this side thing and I thought Poilievre knocked it out of the park the way he responded to it. And pushed it right back, and Carney looked a bit lost on it.
Yeah, and he hinted at the Indian stuff at the end, but never got to it. Carney didn't, right? Like he never got in there.
And then there was Jagmeet Singh, who was an attack dog throughout the whole campaign. I don't know if he's working on the Carney campaign or what it was, but he was very, I think there was a time when Carney actually had to ask him to stop going after Poilievre the whole time.
Yeah, I actually, before I go to you, Greg, Jordan, can I just come back to you on that? Like, people were wondering about that. Why was, obviously, Jagmeet Singh does not like Pierre Poilievre's style, policies, and goals, but he was, over the course of both debates, a little bit more focused on him than you'd think he would be when you're losing votes to Carney. Is it the idea that they want to make the Liberals look inevitable to get people back? Like, why focus more on Poilievre than on Mark Carney in a moment like that?
Well, I think if you look at the number of interventions, he didn't focus more on Poilievre on either night. But for sure, any New Democrat leader has to take the fight to the Conservatives, because a big part of what New Democrat voters are looking for is somebody to do that, somebody to stop the Conservatives, to stand up to them, and particularly a Conservative that many progressives view as scary, as a lot of people think of Pierre Poilievre. So he has to do both. He has to take the fight to Poilievre to show that he's capable of delivering that. But then he also has to poke holes in Carney's case that he's making to progressive voters and point out some of the particular areas in Carney's approach and policy that might not be so appealing to progressives if they take a look below the surface. And so you saw him making that case in particular on things like housing, on healthcare, on cuts to the budget. Those are things that he was really looking to put on the table in the debate on both nights.
Okay, I gotcha. All right, so Greg, high-level takeaway from what you saw.
Yeah, what I'm not talking about, I'm very happy about, which we might have thought last week we'd be talking about Mark Carney's French this week.
His English was very good last night.
His English was good, and I'm, it is my mother tongue, so I am kind of an expert, even have a degree. So all of the expectations were going to be very negative around the French debate. I think between Tout le Monde and the French debate, that's been kind of settled and moved on, and we're not talking about it. In terms of the debate itself, there was a moment where someone texted me and said, why isn't a Liberal saying, why isn't Mark Carney saying more? And he was literally stuck in the middle, and I won't use the lines that also go on in that song lyric about the on your right and left, but there was a moment where literally Singh and Poilievre were arguing over him, and I said that's exactly where he wants to be, because if you're trying to say that you're the adult in the room and you're the best person to face Trump, and these are your two opponents and this is what they're doing, do not get in their way and let them do that. Poilievre is in a tough spot on this because he's kind of damned, either way. If he's the attack dog that he's really good at, but he's not building. But if he's prime ministerial, he is less effective. He seems more muted. And the other thing on Singh, there's a great joke the Beaverton had today, the satirical website, that they said they want to write a debate analysis, but Jagmeet Singh kept interrupting them.
There was a lot of that.
But I think, what he did in the French debate and the English debate, Mr. Singh, is what he needed to do. And he actually, showed that he wants this and that he's in, and I think that's what he needed to do. But I think, the debate itself, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, and Fred, that was a Steelers wheels reference. He was referencing clowns to the left and jokers to the right. You were looking at him a bit off. Anyway,
I'll tell you about
no, I'm trying to bring you along. Make sure
way younger than you guys. So
I know. Greg was too subtle for his own good there. Look, I want to bring in one of the moments that we talked about. Pierre Poilievre had a couple of good moments near the end of the debate in particular. Got emotional, very human about things. Just have a listen to this. We'll talk about it on the other side.
I had a rule that at all my rallies, even when they're really big, I would stand in front of a flag and greet every single person and hear their stories and learn their struggles. And that was always touching to me, that they would put their faith in me or in any of us.
Yeah.
But we've been in such a rush because we have to get off to the next event, so we haven't been able to stop and do that. And I want you to know out there, I haven't forgot about you.
Fred, what do you make of that? We don't usually see Pierre Poilievre speaking in such a way and getting that kind of emotional. What do you think?
I'd love to see more of that. I think he'd be in a better place right now if we saw more of that over the last few years. But at the end of the day, it's at the core of his message at the same time too, right? He's fighting for the little guy, and it drives back to his ballot question of what he's going to do. So I thought that was great, and it is a lot of people voting today, tomorrow, and Monday, and then the Monday after. I don't know if there's time enough to do this, but I think that's the type of message he needs to hammer home.
Jordan, that's what I was wondering about, is that, you've talked about this a lot on your podcast, Curse of Politics, that you do, that he has got a problem with women voters, and this is the kind of thing that, is less scary to women voters, to use the word you like to describe it, but it came late in the debate, and it comes late in the campaign, and really late in the career, do you think this sort of a move is enough?
I mean, I think by far and away, I found that to be his strongest moment of the night. And for me, it was similar to where we saw him in the podcast earlier this week talking about his daughter. And I think that is the type of thing, that's the sort of the human touch, understanding what motivates him as a politician, any leader really, is I think important for voters. And so that's something that is also very difficult to carry off, I think, for a leader of that type of personality. You have to remember that Pierre Poilievre, his entire adult life, has been a partisan politician and a attack dog. It's really difficult to change that persona, particularly when it had been working so well for him for 2 years. So I think those moments were very strong. But I think really for the Conservative campaign to make good use of them, they would need a time machine, because they have spent the last 2 years introducing him to Canadians as that partisan attack dog, as somebody who enjoys the fight, who likes talking about the U-Haul rolling up to CBC, all of those types of things. And so it's going to be very difficult for any sort of personality transplant to register with voters over just 10 days remaining in the campaign. But I think that, as the Conservatives, after the campaign, when they look back, I think that there will be maybe some lamenting that this aspect of his political persona wasn't really developed more over the last couple of years, because it's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, it was an interesting moment to see, but less than 12 hours after that moment, people were voting in Atlantic Canada, the advanced polls. You know what I mean? And with the polls suggesting a lot of people already locked in, can anything happen last night?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'm not his biggest fan, and that
it didn't win you over. No,
well, no, the moment did not, until when he turns to his colleagues on the stage and he acknowledges that they are all in this together.
Yeah, I thought that was a good moment.
That was a different side of that gentleman I haven't seen in a long time. I was at a debate watching event, a small event with Jordan last night. It was a mix of multi-partisan, non-partisan. And the moment when he kind of served it up to Carney when he said, about the carbon tax and Justin Trudeau's not here, in that room, that hit. That was a big, gasp, roar sort of thing. Because the other edgy part of it is Carney was, also moving away from Trudeau at the same time. To Jordan's point, though, about selling him, I checked before I came here. Kate McKenna did a report in August of 2023. The Conservatives spent $3 million for a nice get-to-know-you ad. There was the puzzle and everything. $3 million. That's a lot of money. And they did those ads, and then they dropped them. We never heard from them.
Well, and you never saw any of that sort of on the social media, which is how we communicate. And so you didn't get the virtuous circle, the amplification of things. But look, just because you mentioned it, I want to get to that moment. This is the Mark Carney moment where, Pierre Poilievre is trying to say this is the fourth term of the Justin Trudeau Liberal government, and this was the rebuttal from the Liberal leader.
Mark Carney is asking for a fourth Liberal term, repeating the exact same Liberal promises that priced you out of a house.
You spent years running against Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're
doing a pretty good impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau.
Okay, Greg, he's talked more about the economy in the last month than Justin Trudeau did for a period of time. But that moment in particular, I mean, why did you find that so effective in the debate?
It does feel edgy. As a Liberal, there's going to be this tension around, if the Liberals win under Carney, they're going to have to reckon with some good decisions the Trudeau government made and some bad ones, and how is this going to look? And again, anybody who's in politics, you want to win. And how do we, I really like Justin Trudeau, but I thought it was time for him to step down. I'm not alone in that. And having it said that way, I think was probably very effective for anybody that was having some doubts about, they're about to vote Liberal. Well, this guy has made it very clear that there's a break there.
Fred, does that do it? Because, it is a lot of the same people and, but it is a change in focus and in tone and in style with the change in leader.
Mark Carney's not running as a Liberal. He's running as a progressive conservative. That's what his brand is that they're trying to establish. I go back to the carbon tax where, there was something that Poilievre really, really hammered and turned so many people against it by his campaign against it. He did a great job on that, but then when Carney signed it off on his first day as Prime Minister, Conservatives should have done a victory lap on that. We should have been out saying, we did this, we got this done. Instead, we got in this convoluted argument that it's not actually gone. And we gave him ground on that instead of, and now, we called him carbon tax Carney, and we had these ads running that I don't think were very effective for our cause. I think they helped the Liberals. It turned people off from us. So the messaging, it needs to work for us if we're going to tie it to Trudeau, and we just haven't done that in an effective way.
Yeah, Jordan, I mean, he's obviously a very different type of Prime Minister than Justin Trudeau was. What I find interesting about Mark Carney is he doesn't litigate things the way the Trudeau-era Liberals did. Like when he's confronted with a question on immigration, he goes, oh yeah, we made a mess of that. And he doesn't argue that they didn't, and he just says, here's how we're going to fix it. I don't know if that's effective or what. I mean, what do you make of that moment and just whether he is enough change rhetorically in these things?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think voters have decided he's enough change. And that's one of the fascinating dynamics of this election because it as Fred was saying earlier, it is still a change election. We are still really in that mindset among the voting public. But the magic, the mystique that Carney has brought to the race is that he's been able to persuade a substantial number of voters looking for change that he is that change, not the Conservatives. And so I think that's defying gravity in a lot of ways. That's a very unusual political circumstance, something that he's been able to pull off there. But, it is true. He is quite different from Trudeau. And I think that for progressive voters, this is where there is still space for the NDP to try to get in there and point out that he is not a Trudeau Liberal. This is not the left-leaning Liberal Party that we've had for the last decade. This is a very right-leaning Prime Minister who has some specific agenda items that would maybe not be so appealing to progressives if they were to look a little bit below the surface. And so I think that in a certain way, you're going to see the NDP almost making the opposite argument that the Conservatives are making about how much change Mr. Carney represents.
Okay, well, let's talk a bit about that because Jagmeet Singh, he's been trying to punch through on healthcare, but also trying to punch through on the value of the New Democrats and their role in Parliament. Just have a listen to this moment from the debate last night.
We are going to build this country in a way that has not been seen before. We are literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers in the trade. And that's why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
But I think people are worried, Mr. Carney, if New Democrats aren't there to force Liberals to make sure they remember about people they will forget.
Okay, Jordan, why is that moment so effective? I mean, he's been trying to be the workers' champion in the tariff issue and stuff. Well, why did you like that from Jagmeet Singh?
At the core of the message the Democrats need in order to survive through this campaign and to retain their seats and maybe even grow, who knows, at this point, is that they have to make the case that there's value in having New Democrats in Parliament and in not handing the Liberals a blank check with a majority government. So, we talked a little bit about the polls earlier, and while it's true that there's been a little bit of movement here and there, really the way those votes are piling up in places like the prairies for the Conservatives, it means that we are still looking at an extraordinarily high likelihood of a Liberal majority government. So the question is, in that scenario, who are you going to have in opposition? Are you going to have only Conservatives in opposition who are cheering for deeper cuts, or are you going to have New Democrats there who are fighting for some of the social programs and things that people rely on? So that's the case that Mr. Singh was making last night. And he was using things that the NDP had accomplished in the Confidence and Supply Agreement as a proof point to say that when you get even a small New Democrat presence in Parliament, because of course, remember, they were the fourth party in the last Parliament, and they were able to get through this historic expansion of Medicare. And so that's the value they bring to the table. And so he was really making that case, I think, clearly last night. Now, the question is, can that be heard by voters in time? Are they going to feel secure enough in the inevitability of a Liberal majority that they can cast their vote for New Democrats? And are the New Democrats going to be able to get out and make the argument in key seats that they are actually the strategic vote to defeat the Conservatives?
So, Fred, you just worked on the Ontario campaign, right, with Doug Ford. I mean, Marit Stiles kind of made an effective argument to vote NDP in the places where the NDP existed, because they came third in vote but second in seats. I mean, is this what Jagmeet Singh is doing here? Is this a similar sort of argument? Do you think that punches through here?
I don't know if he's doing it effectively. I think that's what he should be doing and what he needs to hammer on. I think that's the best bet. But, if you look at the Ontario election, it was a very different circumstance where there was no real change election. Ford was going to win. I think we all accepted Ford was going to win. The left and the right and the center all knew he was going to win. So the NDP held their seats. They dropped dramatically in their vote share over the last two elections, but they only lost, I think, one seat from what they had before, which is remarkable. That's quite unheard of. But it was almost like, well, look, if we're not happy with Ford, we can still there's no change. The Liberals didn't catch fire then in Bonnie Crombie's campaign, so there was no real need to move. I think that's very different in this election, where people are choosing who is going to be Prime Minister. And that's the major struggle Singh has in this, and his message just has not resonated at that level. There's no, I think the NDP are heading for a complete wipeout, where they will not have official party status after this.
We saw, Greg, too, like I know I want you to focus on Singh, but Yves-François Blanchet looked a bit lost in these debates in a way I have never seen him look.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's normally very sure and steady and confident and straight ahead, and he just did not have that, certainly in the English debate, which is, normally they're the footloose and fancy-free candidate on that stage.
Yeah.
But Mr. Singh's pitch there, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, it might be too little too late, but it's probably the thing that has worked the best for him thus far. We were chatting last week about, Vancouver Island usually being blue-orange switches, and as Fred, when we chatted afterwards, said, check some of the polling there, there is Liberals in play there.
I think they're in play there.
Yeah, so, obviously that's a concern, especially if you hold a seat in as Mr. Singh does, in British Columbia. I noted that there's been an ad change, for the New Democrats, and I would love to see somebody who is better at recent advertising analysis than I am. But they're very good ads. They look great. But that first one where he was saying that Mr. Carney has spent his entire life, hurting workers. That is something that sticks out like a sore thumb, because if you look at his actual resume, not all of his time has been in the private sector. He worked in government, and it also sounded something that should be coming from Mr. Poilievre, not Mr. Singh, somebody who had a lot of accomplishments through the Supply and Confidence Agreement. Perhaps it tested well, but I don't see it anymore. I don't know if it's still on, but it didn't. I thought it sounded odd.
Gotcha. Fred, quick thought?
Just the block in Blanchet I thought was fascinating, having observed these folks and dealt with them for many years. He was basically talking about working as a partnership in a future parliament that I've never seen them actually talk about.
From the Sovereigntist Party.
The party that wants to destroy Canada wants to save Canada or something. I don't quite understand it. But usually that's case by case. They look at each budget or each bill. But last night throughout the debate, it felt like he was basically saying, I want to be at the table too, which is something I've never actually seen from the Bloc.
Yeah, Mr. Duceppe and Mr. Blanchet have always felt in the English debate like they're playing with house money, and it didn't quite seem that way. I mean, who knows? The Quebec numbers are not good for them or the Conservatives right now. Jordan, I've never seen a debate kind of go sideways like things did last night. The debate itself, full marks, good stuff. The 2 hours in the French debate and the English debate, beforehand and after, where do you want to start on sort of the sideshows?
It was a complete debacle. And I think it really did a disservice in a couple ways. And first and foremost, because it has, frankly, overshadowed a lot of the content of the debates. And that is a disservice to voters who maybe not have a lot of time to contemplate the issues around the campaign. And instead of being able to read a lot of coverage about what's happening in the debate, they're reading about rebel news. And I think, look, these people are not journalists. These are advocacy groups. These are far-right organizations that are interested in disrupting these events. They're not covering them. They're not media. And it was an incredible mistake to allow them into the event in the first place, and then a double mistake to allow them to obtain so many media credentials that they were able to ask almost a majority of the questions to the leaders after the French debate. This is a disservice, I think, to everybody. And people are rightly incredibly angry at the Debate Commission for how this was handled. And there have been no suitable or adequate explanations so far about how this was allowed to happen.
Fred, what are your thoughts on the way everything went down?
Yeah, I think it was a train wreck in many regards, and the debates were pretty good. The way the process or the setup, the way it worked with the one host in French, one host in English. You didn't have a bunch of different hosts coming in from other outlets. So we've done the last few debate commissions.
They've tried to make it a TV show in the past when it needs to be a debate between people who want to run the country.
Right. It reminds me more of the conservative leadership debate when we had Tom Clark hosting and we had paddles and horns going off.
You don't need sticks,
right? So I thought that was good. The sideshow at the end was a complete mess. And I think it was on the debate commission on how they handled this. And I think the problem is we have a debate commission. I don't know why we have this. I don't think we should have this. This is the third election in a row we've had the debate commission, and it's the third election in a row we're talking about the debate commission on the day after the election. I think there's a way to fix this where the parties should just get together like they used to do for all of Canada's history and figure out how you want to do the debates, bringing in a consortium to run it if you want, and put in a proper process where, the Rebel and those folks, they're gonzo journalists. They want to get in there and they want to cover you. They don't want to cover necessarily the news. They want to make you a part of the story and how everything's covered. And that's just not, I don't think, the appropriate place for that.
Yeah, Greg, what do you think of what we saw?
Well, I think they're gonzo. I don't think they're journalists. And, I'm going to sort of quote Bob Fife here, and he points out, and you can draw the line. These groups are connected with a lot of the elements of the Conservative Party. And historically, this goes back in terms of one individual to, Stockwell Day and the origins of part of the Conservative Party. And as Bob Fife said, you can tell when they ask questions and they're, it's the Simpsons episode, Mr. Burns, your campaign has the momentum of a runaway freight train. Why are you so popular? Oh, that's tough but fair. So when you see those questions served up, we know. But the other thing I think that they try to take advantage of is that real journalists do not want to insert themselves in the story and make themselves the story. And, it's really tough. I wasn't there. Jordan wasn't there. Fred, you were there, and we hear things. We've seen some things posted. It sounds pretty horrific.
Yeah, look, it was very difficult. I'm not, it was very chaotic. And you probably saw, so we were in the second hour of our show last night and we were playing a montage of great debate moments of the past. We just had the panel for the first hour, which you're all very familiar with. We used a bit of tape to get them unhooked and out, and we were going to bring Rosie in. And as the tape was playing, Ezra Levant came over, and he was rolling on it. His people were filming it, and he started trying to talk to me and Rosie. I was like, Ezra, we're live, we're doing a show. And he kept, trying to say he wanted to come on the show because he wanted to respond to things that I had raised with Michel Cormier in the interview I did off the top of the show about how did this happen, right? The third-party advertising registrations and those sorts of things. And he kept going and going, and the tape was about to run out, and very smartly, the control room saw what was happening, and instead of coming back to us live after the debate montage ended, they played those reporter rants that we call it a rant, like what Kat Tundy just did. They played the next two of those, and it was still going, and it was still going as we're waiting for security to come and deal with it. And then they finally went to an interview that luckily we had taped with Steve Paikin earlier in the day. And we were able to get things under control and moved on then. Otherwise, we would have had to go to commercial or stop broadcasting, or a possible confrontation between me and Levant would have been aired on television. He said a bunch of stuff to us that I'm not going to repeat, and they recorded it, so they have a record of it. But we went to the debate commission and said this needs to be taken care of. And an official in the debate commission said, no, he promised he won't do it again. And because you were in commercial, they didn't interrupt the broadcast, so they didn't take action. And so all this sort of stuff happened. And, in Jordan, it was, you don't want to be in the middle of that, but you get forced into the middle of it. And then while we were doing that, like Jordan, you've probably all seen the clips, there was shouting matches and arguments and stuff happening in the media center. And everything just went utterly sideways.
Yeah. I mean, it's appalling. Like, that's the only word for it. Journalists, real media, were there, like you and others were there. You guys were there to do your jobs. And that means covering what's happening. And Ezra Levant and the Rebel crew and all of those folks, by all accounts, were there to try to disrupt that work. And that's just not how things should be working in a democracy. I think it's really alarming. I think any attempt to normalize it is wrong. And I think that the fact that the debate commission didn't step in to prevent this, knowing full well the folks and the characters involved, is just an incredible lapse of leadership. And they really haven't answered for that adequately.
Yeah, Fred, I did an interview with Mr. Cormier yesterday, and to his credit, he came out and did it, which I always do respect. And he's a former Radio Canada journalist and former correspondent in his career. But we showed him the paper of the third-party registration. They didn't seem to know anything about it. You know what I mean? Right. Like, they have a staff, they have a legal team. They were forced to accredit them because of a court decision. But it's then how you manage it afterwards. They didn't seem prepared for and didn't seem to know about these other actions. Because it seems to me, if someone's registering as a third-party actor and setting up a separate company to also do that, that maybe is a bit of evidence you can bring into a legal fight in terms of whether someone's a journalist or not.
Right. The fact that they didn't know that is problematic. It shows that that's the problem with these debate commissions. We form them quickly right during an election. We're throwing these people together and expecting them to run these complicated processes, which clearly it's been a failure since the start. We need to get rid of them, and we should just let the parties figure it out going into future elections on how to do this.
Yeah, Greg, I don't know if it's the structure or just how the structure is functioning, but I would hope, if this isn't my last election, and yesterday I felt like I might not make it to the end of this election, that there's a cleaner process for it next time.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame because by most accounts, the French, the English debate, the debates itself went well. It's the things around
just sorry to interrupt you, those were CBC Radio Canada pitched and produced debates. We had to make a pitch to the consortium to be picked to do it, and that's what we presented as a company, and were chosen to do it. So the format and all of that was your national public broadcaster in both official languages that delivered that.
Well, thank you for that, because I credit where credit is due. The other thing is there are plenty of people around communications, politics, that could serve on that advisory committee, on that board, who know how to run election night, know how to run a debate. It should not have sometimes the Trudeau government, when they pick people for things, it was like they were casting based on who they were and what they were. Get people who can actually do the job.